Hi guys, welcome to this morning's trending. Unfortunately, you've just got me for the next couple of days as the boys head off on their cycling fundraiser, and we'll be showing a documentary about that soon here on iconic.com. As per usual, we are associated with the brand new Iconic coffee. Head over to shop.iconic.com and enter the code trending for 10% off. So what have we got on today? What is happening in this crazy, mad, strange world? Well, Benjamin Netanyahu is still doing stuff. Israel's Shin Bet says Netanyahu's policies help pave way for October the 7th. Now, we know this. We've been trying to say this for a while, that this was allowed to happen. There is no way that Hamas, with their limited military equipment, could have got past, the security there, the Iron Dome of Israel. They were on tractors and hang gliders. So even The Economist had a magazine cover out showing and depicting this. These guys, we know the IDF were warned even by Egypt and other establishments that this was going to happen weeks in advance. It was likely allowed to happen as a problem reaction solution to go in to Gaza and do what they've done in terms of the Greater Israel Project. It's all part of that. So let's read a little bit more about this. One's from The Guardian. So Israel's International Security Agency, Shin Bet, has said Benjamin Netanyahu's policies were among the underlying causes for the 7th of October attack, in which Hamas and other militants killed about 1,200 Israelis. In its report on the 7th of October attack, Shin Bet acknowledged its own responsibility, admitting it was aware of warning signs that Hamas was planning an operation. But the agency, also known as the General Security Service, did not grasp the scale, timing, and location of the planned attack. Now, this is the most advanced security, allegedly, on the planet, and they didn't know this. They just went a bit, they're just dicking around, don't worry about it. Obviously, you'd be hard pushed to believe that. And we know that Netanyahu was propping up Hamas from a while back. This is what he said to the people around him, I think as far back as 2019, about Hamas. Anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas. Netanyahu told his Likud party's Knesset members in March 2019. This is part of our strategy. This is part of our strategy. Wow. So he's openly saying this here, and this was Hertz.com. This is reporting on this a long, long time ago, even nearly 6 years ago now. So we are aware that they need this as a problem reaction solution. So they were aware that they were building them up, propping them up. And that's kind of quite well known, although most people who don't want to believe in the fact that this has been conspired to happen, God forbid, you believe in that, don't want to believe that. They'll pick and choose the evidence. But here it is, apparently in his own words. So let's get back to the article here then. So the Shin Bet also pointed to the daily Jewish prayers that have been taking place in recent years in the compound around the Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa Mosque, known to the Jews as the Temple Mount. The prayers violate a 58-year-old understanding that with Jordan that only Muslims should be allowed to pray at the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the esplanade around it. But they were championed by the governing coalition's former National Security Minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir. So they've obviously just been pushing this for a third temple. Now we know what's going on. We've spoken about this ad nauseum, this third temple, this Temple of Solomon, this Lurianic Kabbalah element, and it quite clearly shows here that it was likely allowed to happen. As much as we don't want to think people could be that evil, it was allowed to happen, and he was fostering Hamas a long time ago. So there's just more evidence that his lack of policies allowed this to happen. So another part of that was really, really interesting was the buildup of military arms. So it goes on to say, among the main reasons for a Hamas military buildup before the attacks, an 8-page public summary of the report listed an Israeli policy of quiet towards the group. Here we go again. Go back to 2019 and what he said there. Apparently referring to a policy of restraint in the use of force to keep Hamas's military capacity or capability in check. It also listed Netanyahu's acquiescence in the flow of funds from Qatar to Gaza. So Qatar is where the HQ is, Hamas HQ is as well. A policy designed to divide Palestinians by boosting Hamas at the expense of the Palestinian state. So you had the PLO there, which is what they were trying to get rid of and replace it with Hamas. So are Hamas a created body by Israel? Many people believe that they were, and they are, and that's what they've done, is control both sides there. It's a really interesting article. It just points out and backs up what many of us have been saying, that this was allowed to happen. And unfortunately, we're going to have to come to terms, if that is the case, that this is true. So who else is in on this, and what's the outcome? The outcome appears to be this messianic agenda for Solomon's Temple, taking down the Alaska Mosque, putting up the third Solomon's Temple, and this world to come event. We know that once they sack Medina, the Muslims will be brought in. Those of the Islamic faith will think that that's the start of Armageddon. And there's so much around this narrative that brings in the three Abrahamics to be pitted against each other, that it appears to be there's at least an element of truth to this. So, there's other ways of looking at this, and I don't hear any of this messianic stuff being brought up by any of the politicians in the background, even those that are clearly aware that Trump is on the side of Russia, or at least pushing the Russian side, and Zelensky isn't all that he said he is. They still don't understand this stuff. And I think this is the stuff that's really important to understand. If you're going to understand what's going to happen, there has to be an end goal to the game. Someone's got to win their game. And unfortunately, these lunatics do appear to see that this is a game, or see it as a game. So the next story I want to talk about involves artificial intelligence. Now, we've seen this come on so much over the last few months. We've had the Stargate project, or Project Stargate, from Donald Trump with his 500 billion. He's going to stick into this project, apparently. Then they panicked about DeepSeek, which they knew about a long time ago anyway. I think I said there was 46, or I researched there was 46,000, I believe, shared papers between China and the US in terms of AI research development. Their students go from the universities like MIT to CCP sponsored universities in China. So there's so much crossover there anyway. It's an illusion of division. They always seem to be. So this was a really good article on the Los Angeles Times. So great documentaries reveal history's truth sometimes. Unregulated AI threatens to distort it. And this is a really good point to bring up, I believe. So, a furious political leader shouting a message of hate to an adoring audience, a child crying over the massacre of her family, emaciated men in prison uniforms, starved to the edge of death because of their identities. As you read each sentence, specific imagery likely appears in your mind, seared in your memory and our collective conscience through documentaries and textbooks, news media, and museums. So this is just saying that the news will put certain images in your mind. But what about if AI gets involved in creating images of its own? So there's a disclosure of the use of AI in films, and there is so far in documentaries, but how much more important does it need to be in documentaries? And we're seeing now it's getting so close, it's very hard to tell at some points. Some people are better than others, some companies are better than others at doing it, but it's going to get to the point very soon that you're not going to be able to tell the difference. And so this article goes on to say, while such disclosures may be important for feature films, it is clearly crucial for documentaries. In the spring of 2023, we began to see synthetic images and audio used in the historical documentaries we were working on, with no standards in place for transparency. We fear this comingly of real and unreal could compromise the non-fiction genre and the indispensable role it plays in our shared history. How do you know when what you're looking at is real footage and not? And we are so close to this that the blurrings of these realities are going to overlap very, very soon. In February 2024, OpenAI previewed its next to video platform, Sora, with a clip called Historical Footage of California During the Gold Rush. The video was convincing. A flowing stream filled with the promises of riches, a blue sky and rolling hills, a thriving town, men on horseback. It looked like a western where the good guy wins and rides off into the sunset. It looked authentic, but it was fake. And this is where we're getting to. And I think this is really important to bring up. We are so close to this. And documentaries right now, it doesn't appear to be there's that much in there to say that when you've used AI in the edit or not. And if you're going to use an AI program to try and detect AI, what rabbit hole are we going down there? And unfortunately, when you're going to fast forward 50 or 60 years, you're going to be in a position where the future, the children of the future, aren't going to know what is real from the past and what is not. What is real footage? What is fake footage? We're getting this already. Everything we see or photos, people go, well, it's been photoshopped. Go back 30 years, there was no such thing, but at least in the mainstream, we didn't have that element of them being too manipulated unless it's the moon landings, obviously. So this is really important because the lines between reality and fiction are going to get so crossed here because how are humans going to know? And then you've got things like compromat and you've got things like news reports that could be entirely AI generated. And how would you know if they're real or not? And then where does that leave us? That leaves us in chaos, complete chaos of understanding what's reality and what's not. If the world wasn't as mad as it seems right now, unfortunately, AI will probably be involved with this as well. You've seen the Donald Trump video that came out last week, or he shared of his Trump Gaza and how vile and disgusting it is. And I've even had people say to me in comments that it was trolling. When is that acceptable to troll the deaths of thousands of innocent civilians and children, tens of thousands of children in Gaza? When is that acceptable for the president to be trolling that and using that? Where is the line of common decency? And then that's getting flipped on its head. So that's acceptable now. And what's becoming acceptable is most abhorrent behavior. So the competing plans for rebuilding Gaza after the war is absolutely insane. Arab nations have agreed plans to rebuild Gaza after the war, including details on who could run the territory. But Donald Trump wants to build a Riviera under US control. I mean, the gumption of these guys pretending like this is sane behavior to be able to go in there, destroy the place, wreck it, and then just take it over. Like, that's just a given now, is it? That's just a given. Arab leaders have adopted a plan to rebuild Gaza that will cost tens of billions of pounds. And it is in stark contrast to President Donald Trump's proposal for the US to take control of Palestine. Israeli military offensive in Gaza followed the Hamas attacks on 7th of October, which we've just previously looked at, that were likely, it seems, or there's a lot of evidence to suggest they were allowed to happen as a problem, reaction, solution. Many of us have been saying this for over a year now. So it has left swaths of the densely populated enclave razed to the ground and nearly 2 million people displaced from their homes. 2 million people displaced from their homes. And Donald Trump's putting out an AI video, although he's not putting out, he shared it, of him mocking and standing on the beach or sitting on the beach with Netanyahu, drinking cocktails whilst the sun's up and saying this is the new Gaza. And there's women on the beach with beards, and Elon Musk is eating some junk food for some reason and throwing money in the air so kids can catch it. This isn't the way we behave as human beings. The depravity is becoming normalized. That is the president of the United States of America, whatever you believe that to mean. You at least had to pretend 10 years ago that you were a half decent person while you're at Bohemian Grove. So the ceasefire deal between Israel and Gaza's rulers, Hamas, which include Israel hostages being exchanged for Palestinian prisoners, continues to hold, but has become very fragile following the end of phase one with no agreement on phase two. Questions remain about the future of the Gaza Strip, such as who will pay for the reconstruction and who will govern it. I mean, they're arguing over this, over the scraps. This is bizarre. This is a really, really bizarre situation that is even just talked about in that way. I find it bizarre anyway, that they're talking about fighting over the scraps of what Israel have done. And the United States want it, and Egypt want it, and what about there's people involved? This is insane behavior, to my mind, anyway. Discussed at a summit of Arab nations on Tuesday, the plan comes after Egypt, Jordan, and the Gulf Arab states spent almost a month consulting on an alternative to Mr. Trump's proposal. Mr. Trump's proposal of him sitting topless with Netanyahu, drinking while Elon Musk stuffs his face with junk food, and then there's lady boys on the beach. That can we have another version? Can someone else come up with a different proposal? Then we'll come back to that one because that seems like we'll come back to it. We'll revisit it we're not ruling it out. In terms of who could run, or in terms of who would run Gaza, Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi said his country had worked in cooperation with Palestinians to create a committee of independent Palestinian technocrats. Now that is really, really interesting. Independent Palestinian technocrats. Now I wonder if we looked into these funding of these independent Palestinian technocrats, you might find they're not so independent after all. I getting a gut feeling that that might be the case there. Or I mean, technocrats, you got to have a lot of money to be a technocrat anyway. So come on. So these independent Palestinian technocrats who would be entrusted with governing Gaza after the war. So does it matter if these independent do the little bunny ear things there, quotation marks? Say that they're independent, but they're really funded by the same guys that would have funded Trump anyway. And I think that's where we're going to find out, unfortunately, that that's going to be the two options are never really an option. They're just different versions of the same thing. And I think we're finding that across the board. Remember what the Messianic agenda is, and Gaza included in that, and the Solomon's Temple and Temple Mount. This is about the Greater Israel Project, or the Greater Israel Kingdom. Christopher John Biertness is someone whose work I think is fantastic, and he talks about it being King Ramses II's kingdom, and they're trying to recreate that. But there's obviously a Kabbalistic undertone to what they want to do with Solomon's Temple, and AI will play into that as well. So all of this stuff is coming together, and it's really, really disturbing that a lot of this is just being seen as almost like a LARP by Trump and his gang, and it's almost like a game. So the article goes on to say this committee would oversee humanitarian aid, would manage the territory for a temporary period before governance is eventually handed over to the Palestinian Authority, PA, which currently governs in the West Bank, apparently, if they're not all, genocided by now. The other critical issue is what happens to Hamas. It has been in charge of Gaza, or in Gaza, since 2007. And Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to destroy the militant group that he may well have helped create in the first place. You can see how this is happening there. So, what's going to happen then? They're going to hand it straight back to them, are they? So obviously, Egypt want to go in there and take it over. The US want to have their own plans for it. But again, I'm always skeptical. Maybe it's just me that they might all be working off the same hymn sheet. Hamas has agreed not to field candidates for the technocrat committee, but it would have to give its consent to the tasks, members, and the agenda of the committee that would work under the PA's supervision. Not sure that makes any difference. That sounds like office speaks to me. That sounds like legal terms to me for the same thing. The Israeli foreign minister called the plan rooted in outdated perspectives and rejected the reliance on the PA, while complaining Hamas were left in power by the plan. The US also voiced its approval. Trump's one is obviously far better, isn't it? Having bearded ladies on the beach and him there semi-naked with Netanyahu drinking alcohol whilst Elon Musk eats junk food. And then there's a big statue like King Herod of Donald Trump somewhere in there as well. But yeah, I mean, that's a better option than this one. So that's where we're at on planet Earth right now, guys. So if you didn't know, we live on an insane planet where people can propose strange things and still be the president of the United States, and it gets vetoed over something that seems a far more sensible, if not just as a bad outcome eventually anyway. This is a really sad situation. Obviously, the world, I don't think, really understand how this has come together because they don't understand the messianic agenda. And if that's not part of it, then I'm completely lost too, because it seems to be it's heading to this end times agenda, with Solomon's Temple being a root point there. Remember to do your own research and come to your own conclusions. It's a very deep subject to look into. Thank you for joining me today. You'll see me again tomorrow morning with new news stories. That's hard to say. We are sponsored and in association with our own coffee here, so you can head over to shop.iconic.com to get that and use the trending as the code to get 10% off. And we will see you in about 24 hours time, when I'll be sitting here going through some more madness. Remember to do your own research, come to your own conclusions, and I will see you tomorrow. Take care. Goodbye.